Welcome to True Echo, where real emotions meet powerful stories that hit home. Today's story takes you deep into the elite world of billion-dollar deals, where pride, dignity, and legacy clash head-on with power and prejudice. What happens when a black CEO witnesses her father humiliated on the steps of success? She doesn't just speak out, she walks away from a $1 billion merger and leaves the entire industry reeling. This isn't just about money. It's about values that can't be bought. Now, let's begin. The sun hung high over Hawthorne Crest, its golden rays bouncing off the marble steps of one of the most exclusive country clubs in California. Here, deals were made over $100 lunches and eye contact meant contracts. Generational wealth floated through the air like perfume, thick, invisible, suffocating. Men in navy jackets and Rolex watches leaned back in wicker chairs, women in pastel linen sets clinked glasses, and not one face was unfamiliar to the staff. It was a club built not just on wealth, but on legacy, and legacy had rules. The moment the black sedan pulled up to the front, the first rule was quietly challenged. It wasn't just the car, which lacked the shine of a Maybach or the sleekness of a Tesla. It was the man who stepped out. Walter Brooks, 70, with a frame shaped by decades of hard work, moved slowly but with unmistakable confidence. He didn't carry himself like he needed to impress anyone, because he didn't. Wearing a navy blazer that stretched across his still solid shoulders and a deep burgundy tie, Walter adjusted his glasses and glanced up the stone steps where laughter echoed from the patio. In one hand, he held a small box, wrapped in gold paper, just a small office gift for his daughter. Elena had insisted he come. "You built this with me," she'd said. "This deal is as much yours as it is mine." He smiled at the thought, his heart full of pride. He had barely reached the third step when a voice sliced through the air like cold wind. "Sir," the woman said, stepping in his path. She wore a tailored navy blazer, earpiece in one ear, and a name tag that read Operations Manager, Lisa. "Staff and deliveries go around the back." Walter blinked. "Excuse me." She crossed her arms. "Catering's already inside. If you're late, please use the left side entrance. This space is reserved for guests only." He opened his mouth, but another voice beat him to it. "Well," it chimed with acidic charm, "it seems we've opened the gates for sanitation workers today." Laughter sparkled faintly like broken glass. At the top of the steps stood Victoria Ashcroft, co-chair of the Ashcroft Group, the white billionaire family merging with Elena Brooks' company that day. Dressed in ivory silk and sipping from a crystal flute, she didn't need to speak loudly. Her words slithered across stone and settled in ears like poison. Walter didn't flinch. But his grip on the box tightened. The color in his face dulled, the sparkle in his eyes faded. Still, he stood tall, silent. From behind the glass doors, Elena had seen everything. She moved through the crowd like a storm cloaked in elegance, gray dress, low heels, hair tightly pulled back. As she reached her father, she placed a hand gently on his arm. "You okay, Daddy?" He nodded. "Yeah." But he wasn't. She could feel it in his silence, see it in the tension along his jaw. He looked down at the marble steps, as if they might swallow him whole. "You're not waiting out here," she said firmly. Then, turning to the woman who blocked his path, Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "He's my father. And he's walking in the front." They ascended together, side by side. Inside, the dining room was a mirror of power, white linen, crystal chandeliers, muted violins humming through the air. At the head table sat the deal, $900 million in logistics infrastructure, scale, and international power, all riding on Elena's signature. But she wasn't sitting yet. She had taken her father to a quiet room down the hall. He'd tried to make light of it, "Fancy water in here, probably cost more than my truck." But his voice was flat. His pride was bruised. Elena stood in the back of the room now, watching the scene unfold. Watching the chair that waited for her. watching the people who hadn't spoken up. "Julian," she said quietly to her COO. "Did you see her face when she said it?" He hesitated. "I heard the words. I didn't see your father's face." "I did," she said. "And I saw mine reflected in his." Then she walked toward the table. All eyes turned as she approached the chair beside Victoria. The room stilled. "Elena," Victoria said sweetly, "everything all right?" Instead of sitting, Elena rested both hands on the back of the chair. "Before we proceed," she said, voice steady, "I have something to say." Murmurs hushed. Even champagne paused. "You all know what this deal means, for infrastructure, for scale, for profit." Her tone hardened. "But you don't know what it cost me to get here." She spoke not of spreadsheets, but of stories. Folding tables in garages, nights in trucks, missed meals her father quietly endured. She told them her company wasn't born in boardrooms, it was born in struggle, on the back of her father's sacrifices. And today, she continued, that man was mocked. He was told to go around the back. He was made to feel small in a place I was invited to rule. Victoria's expression curdled. "If this is about an apology." "It's not," Elena interrupted. "This is about value. Not market value, human value." Then she walked away from her chair and stood behind a vacant one, far from the contracts, far from the champagne. "I'm not signing." The silence was thunder. Preston Mallory, senior counsel for the Ashcroft Group, leaned forward as though proximity might change her mind. "Elena," he said, voice low, "this isn't just a deal. This is your legacy." "My legacy," she said, eyes locked on him, "will not be built on silent compromise." Victoria shifted in her chair, smile brittle. "Let's not make this emotional." Elena's gaze sharpened. "You think I built a logistics empire by being emotional?" Her voice didn't rise, but its weight cracked through the tension like lightning. She looked around the room, not at the decor, not at the wealth, but at the faces. "You want to do business with me. But you can't respect the man who sacrificed everything to give me a shot. That's not a partnership. That's patronage." Julian stood at the far wall, silent. He knew this wasn't impulsive. This was Elena doing what she always did, calculated, courageous, unflinching. Still, even he hadn't expected her to walk away. Victoria was still trying to recover control. "We'll give you space, Elena. Take a moment." "No," Elena said, her voice like steel velvet. "You already took the moment. You made it into a spectacle." She turned without another word and walked out. The next morning, her name was everywhere. CEO walks away from $900 million deal over father's humiliation. It started small, on a niche business podcast. But the story moved fast, first Twitter, then national media, then international. Everyone had a take. Was she a hero? A cautionary tale? A fool? Her company's board was split. Some thought she should issue a statement to repair the narrative. Others demanded damage control. Elena, meanwhile, sat in her Seattle office, coffee untouched, watching the city breathe outside the window. Then came the email flood. A warehouse manager in Texas who had been passed over for promotions for years wrote, "I didn't know we were allowed to say no." A black single mother from Ohio wrote, "You just showed my daughter how to keep her crown on." But not all messages were kind. Investors threatened to walk. Anonymous trolls called her irrational. News anchors debated her mental fitness to run a billion-dollar enterprise. Nia Whitlow, Elena's head of communications, burst into her office. "They're trying to flip this," she said. "Ashcroft's leaking internal memos. They're painting you as unstable." Elena didn't blink. "Let them." Nia frowned. "So you're not going to respond?" "I'm not going to fight lies with shouting," Elena said. "We tell the truth." Let it spread on its own. Later that night, in a small room with no press lights, Elena sat in front of a single camera. I didn't cancel that deal because of pride, she said. I canceled it because dignity isn't something you auction off for contracts. My father stood tall on those steps. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. But they tried to shrink him. Her eyes held fire. If leadership means ignoring that to collect a check, then I want no part of it. The video was 10 minutes. It didn't go viral. It went nuclear. By day's end, it was shared by celebrities, labor unions, college students. Truckers reposted it. Fortune 500 CEOs emailed her privately. She didn't just speak for herself. She had struck something buried deep, an exhaustion with politeness in the face of degradation. Meanwhile, at the Ashcroft estate, panic settled behind polished windows. Victoria stood in the family library as Eleanor Wynne, her PR strategist, read aloud excerpts of Elena's video. Because I won't trade my father's pride for your projections. She's radicalizing, Victoria scoffed. It's theatrical. Clinton, her son, stepped in. No, it's truthful. She glared at him. You're siding with her. I'm siding with not watching this family collapse in public. Mason added, we should have apologized. You mocked her father on camera. I made a mistake, Victoria snapped, not a crime. Eleanor closed her tablet. In today's world, that line doesn't matter. Perception is everything. So they released a statement. The Ashcroft Group regrets the recent miscommunication that led to the premature end of merger talks. We remain committed to equity, dignity, and shared values. Elena read it once and deleted it. They think this ends here, she told Julian. It doesn't, he asked. She shook her head. This is only the start. By the end of that week, something remarkable began to happen, not orchestrated, not planned. It grew like roots cracking through concrete. A former intern at Brooks Freight posted a photo of herself with Elena from 5 years prior, captioned, "She taught me that respect isn't negotiable." A Latino driver from Arizona uploaded a video testimonial, describing how the company kept him on full salary during the worst months of the pandemic, even when profits dipped. That's what leadership looks like, he said. And then came the most powerful voice of all. Walter. In a short clip filmed in his living room, wearing his usual cardigan and sitting beneath a framed photo of Elena's high school graduation, Walter looked directly at the camera. I didn't ask my daughter to stand up for me, he began. But I raised her to stand up for herself. His voice, rough with age but sharp with clarity, continued. They saw an old black man and assumed he didn't belong. That's not new. What's new is she said no. She didn't cry about it. She didn't curse. She walked away from money most people would crawl for, and she did it to honor her name. The video was reposted by veterans, educators, single parents, activists. A community college in Birmingham played it over the intercom before class. For many, Walter wasn't just a man. He became a mirror, of the fathers and grandfathers whose sacrifices had too often been dismissed or forgotten. But with every moment of momentum, pressure mounted. Brooks Freight was facing internal disruption. Several clients began to hedge, pausing shipments, re-evaluating partnerships. The stock fluctuated. Elena's board scheduled an emergency meeting. Julian entered her office with his laptop under one arm and tension written across his face. They're nervous. Of course they are, Elena replied. We're standing still while the world moves. He sat across from her. They want you to speak at the DC Ethical Business Summit. I'm not a speaker. You are now, Julian said. She looked away, eyes distant. I didn't ask for this. He leaned in. That's what makes it real. She was quiet. Then, what if I can't hold this weight? You already are, Julian said. But you can't carry it alone. That night, Elena visited Walter again. He was in his usual spot, TV remote in one hand, crossword puzzle on the tray beside him. She sat down, resting her head on the couch cushion next to his. "Daddy, you think I went too far?" He took a long moment. Then, "Baby girl, I saw you on that screen. You looked like your mother. Fire under calm. You didn't go too far. You just finally took up your space." She blinked back something thick behind her eyes. "They're coming after us now." "They always do," he said gently. "But this time, they're afraid you might not back down." The next day, Elena called an all-hands meeting at the warehouse. No media. Just the team. Standing on a makeshift platform in front of forklifts and pallets, she addressed them plainly. "I didn't walk away to make headlines," she said. "I walked away to make a stand. Because what happened to my father happens every day, to people with no cameras and no CEO daughters. So if you're with me, we're not just running freight anymore. We're running toward change." A young dispatcher, barely out of college, raised her hand. "Are we gonna be okay?" Elena smiled faintly. "I don't know. But we're gonna be honest. We're gonna be bold. And we're gonna keep building, even if the ground shakes." They erupted in applause. Not loud. But real. The world outside moved faster than Elena anticipated. By Monday morning, 3 news anchors were debating her leadership on primetime panels. A conservative host called her a dangerous example of emotional overreach. A liberal commentator said she was what modern business ethics should look like. And nestled in between those extremes was the truth no one could fully package: Elena Brooks had changed the rules. Not with a speech. Not with a lawsuit. With a quiet no. Back at Ashcroft Group, the marble walls echoed with discontent. Clinton and Mason Ashcroft sat across from their mother in the estate's sun-drenched solarium, papers spread across a glass table. "She's shifted the cultural tide," Clinton said bluntly. Victoria looked unimpressed. "It's a trend. People love a martyr until it costs them money." "It hasn't cost her yet," Mason added. "If anything, she's gaining ground." Victoria exhaled, then snapped, "Do you think I don't know how this works?" "No, I think you're clinging to an era that's fading," Clinton replied. She stared at her sons, one cool-headed and practical, the other conflicted but quiet. It wasn't just the merger she was losing. It was control over the room she'd dominated for decades. At Brooks Freight, Elena prepared for something different. The launch of an internal initiative, part support program, part revolution. She named it the Walter Brooks Foundation. Designed to support warehouse workers, entry-level drivers, and their families, the foundation offered childcare stipends, tuition support, mental health access, and more. It wasn't just a benefit package, it was a statement. Success should never depend on silence, Elena told the small audience at the launch party. It should grow from community. Under tents in the warehouse lot, workers laughed, kids played in bounce houses, and food trucks passed out barbecue and tacos. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. Mia joined her near the grill. "You realize you've turned a PR crisis into a movement?" Elena shook her head. "I didn't start a movement. I just stopped pretending." From across the lot, Walter arrived with Julian. The old man wore his usual cap and windbreaker. But his smile as he saw his daughter, it radiated more than any corporate award ever could. They sat together with their food on paper plates, watching the crowd. "You remember that first van you bought?" Walter asked. Elena chuckled. "The one with the broken AC? I still have the invoice." He took a sip of lemonade. "Didn't think it'd lead to this." Elena looked out at the crowd, then back at her father. "I didn't think they'd try to push you out of something you helped build." "They always try, baby. But this time, we didn't let them." At sunset, she took the stage, holding the mic with both hands, steady and calm. I spent years chasing invitations, trying to get a seat at the table. But I finally realized some tables were never meant to include us. So I stopped asking. She paused. And I built one of my own. Applause rose, not wild, not chaotic, but layered, heartfelt, thunderous in its sincerity. Somewhere in the crowd, a young girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "She looks like me." And in that one sentence, everything Elena fought for was worth it. The glow of the celebration faded by midnight, but the tremors it sent through the business world only intensified. By sunrise, clips from Elena's speech were stitched across TikTok, reshared on Instagram stories by celebrities, activists, and even small-town mayors. But the true spark came not from what was said, but what was felt. She hadn't spoken like a CEO protecting equity value. She had spoken like a daughter refusing to exchange her father's dignity for corporate approval. And that terrified the old guard. At Ashcroft headquarters, Victoria stood watching Bloomberg headlines flash across a large monitor in the strategy room. Mason and Clinton sat in silence, reading the morning's media fallout. Elena Brooks announces Worker Equity Foundation. Public support skyrockets. Elena Brooks turns public shame into blueprint for new business leadership. Is Elena Brooks building the future, and leaving legacy billionaires behind? Victoria's fingers twitched around the coffee cup in her hand. She's not building the future, she said. She's exploiting sympathy. Clinton raised an eyebrow. Sympathy doesn't sustain a movement, mother. But values? Those do. She embarrassed this family, she snapped. On camera. In front of the world. Mason looked up. And you're still worried about how you looked. Not what you did. Her mouth flattened. A silence settled like dust, uncomfortable, fine-grained, hard to clean. That same morning, an anonymous email landed in the inbox of a Seattle Ledger journalist. It was a leak, internal Ashcroft memos plotting a narrative takedown of Elena's company, dig through old licensing issues, imply fraud, question her leadership stability. The reporter ran with it. Headlines shifted. Was Elena's stand just a strategic stunt? Anonymous sources suggest Brooks Freight was facing instability. Business news outlets began publishing skeptical, deep dives. Think pieces questioned Elena's motive. Commentators shifted tones, from admiration to suspicion. Inside Brooks Freight, Julian paced the hallway outside Elena's office. "They're playing dirty," he said when she opened the door. "I expected this. They're trying to flip the narrative, Elena. Make it about ego. About recklessness. I know. So we fight back." She nodded slowly. But not with the same tools. Nia joined them, holding a list of warehouse workers and longtime staff. "We've already begun filming. Real people, real stories. No polish. Just truth. Let them speak," Elena said. "Let them show the world what we built, and why it matters." Over the next week, a series of short videos began dropping. Truck drivers talking about Elena showing up on Christmas to deliver late packages. Dispatchers remembering the nights she helped mop floors. A single mom talking about how Elena personally fronted her medical bills when her child was sick. But none hit harder than Walter. In a follow-up video, he sat once again in his modest living room. "They said she walked away for pride," he said. "That's wrong. She walked away to protect what we built together. That day on the steps wasn't the first time someone tried to push me around. But it was the first time someone with power turned around and pulled me forward." The video flooded every corner of the internet. Veterans reshared it. Community groups quoted it. Even a Wall Street trader reposted it with the caption, "This is leadership." Ashcroft tried to counter with a new round of press releases and partnerships with inclusion consultants, but it was too late. Their responses rang hollow. Calculated. Bloodless. At Brooks Freight, the momentum felt different, organic, almost sacred. People weren't just watching. They were listening. And they were remembering the times they had stayed silent, when someone they loved was asked to use the back door. In the days that followed, Elena found herself in a new kind of spotlight, one she had never sought, yet one she now stood fully within. She was no longer just a successful black CEO. She had become a symbol of resistance, of integrity, of something the business world wasn't used to, someone who walked away from the throne to stand beside the people. But symbols come with weight. And the pressure to represent others, to never falter, to never say the wrong thing, it built like steam behind her ribcage. She took long walks late at night, through the silent loading docks of her first warehouse. Past the faded wall where her mission statement was still painted in chipped blue, "Move with honor." Julian found her there one evening. "They're asking again," he said. "The summit in D.C. Keynote speaker. Ethics in leadership. They want you front and center." "I don't want the stage," she replied quietly. "I just want to keep building." Julian leaned against the doorway. "You're building something bigger now. And whether you like it or not, people are holding on to your words like oxygen." Elena sighed. "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up. And you own it. But you don't go back to pretending." That night, she sat with Walter on the back porch of his house. The city buzzed far away. Crickets filled the quiet. "You regret anything?" she asked him. He chuckled. "A few haircuts. One Dodge truck I should have never bought." She smiled, then fell serious. "I mean, what I did." Walter turned, voice soft. "You think the world needs more people who fold? Who measure dignity in dollars?" She looked down. "I just keep wondering if I should have found a way to have both." Walter's hand rested over hers. "Baby girl, you did. You have it. Look around. Look at the people you've lifted. Look at what they're doing now because you didn't bow." Elena nodded slowly. That same week, she received a cryptic message. A call request, from someone with no name, no company, just a simple line: "We believe it's time to build something new, with people who understand value beyond numbers." She answered. A deep, deliberate male voice spoke. "We've been watching, quietly. And we think you're not just what's next. You're what's needed." "No agenda?" she asked. "No pitch yet," the voice replied. "Only an idea. What if the next great business empire was founded not on profit, but principle?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked out over the skyline, then back at the framed photo of her first warehouse crew, still hanging behind her desk. "I'm listening," she said. The following month, Elena stood in a simple blazer, not a power suit, on the modest stage at the newly announced Walter Brooks Foundation headquarters. The building wasn't glass or steel, just sturdy brick and glass, repurposed from an old freight office. But it had more energy than any high-rise lobby. 100 staff members stood in the lot out front. A few news cameras lingered nearby, but Elena wasn't speaking for them. She was speaking for every hand that ever got dirty building something real. "My father taught me something long ago," she began, voice steady in the spring air. "You don't need to shout to be powerful. But you do need to stand." Behind her, a banner read, "Legacy begins at ground level." The initiative she launched, fully funded by diverted merger capital and fresh investment from a new coalition of values-based partners, would directly support workers in logistics, warehousing, and supply chain sectors. Scholarships. Legal support. Childcare grants. Even a crisis hotline. "This isn't a foundation to polish our image," she said. "It's a response to what happens when people are told to enter through the back." Walter stood at the side, hands in his jacket pockets, nodding gently. After the ceremony, Elena walked through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging families. A young Latina driver approached her with a trembling voice. "You don't know me, but, the day your story went viral, I walked out of a job where I'd been called names for 3 years. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I deserved better. And now I drive for your company." Elena smiled. "You had that power all along. I just reminded you." In the months that followed, Brooks Freight not only stabilized, it thrived. The new partner group, formed from a coalition of diverse business leaders, entrepreneurs, and second-chance investors, brought not just money, but momentum. Together, they launched a new joint venture, Frontline Forward, a logistics model owned in part by its employees. With shared equity, real say, and real skin in the game. At an industry gala in Chicago, Elena was presented with the Human Legacy Leadership Award. But she almost didn't attend. It was Walter who convinced her. "Take the flowers, baby," he said. "Then go back to planting." On the night of the gala, a host read her bio. The applause was thunderous. But when Elena took the stage, she didn't bask in it. She began with a story. "Years ago, I watched a man get told he didn't belong. And I realized, I didn't want to belong at a table that would treat him that way. So I left. And when I did, I found a lot of you standing outside, waiting, wondering if you were ever going to be invited in. What if we stopped waiting? What if we just started building?" That night, she didn't sign a contract. She signed a promise, to never trade respect for return. Back in Seattle, weeks later, Walter and Elena sat on the back porch again. "You ever miss the money?" he asked her, eyes twinkling. She smirked. "No. But sometimes I miss the silence." Walter chuckled. "You were never made for silence." The night sky stretched over them, stars glowing above the city that once overlooked her. Not anymore. Elena had become something more than a CEO. More than a leader. She had become a mirror, for everyone who had been overlooked, undervalued, and told to wait their turn. And she had rewritten what it meant to lead. Not just with numbers. But with purpose. In a world where success is often measured in contracts and headlines, Elena Brooks showed us that true leadership means knowing what, and who, is worth standing for. Respect is not a perk. It's the price of admission to any deal worth making. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that silence is not the only option. Comment below, what would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes? Subscribe to True Echo for more powerful, real-feeling stories of dignity, courage, and unexpected justice. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to never miss a moment that could change your perspective.